And for neighborhoods that lived in fear for an entire day, we are eternally grateful for the outcome here tonight. We have a suspect in custody. I want to thank all of the partners who worked tirelessly over the last 4 days, including the FBI, the Transit Police, our brothers with the Boston Police Department, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the support that we've gotten from our governor over the last 4 days. We're exhausted, folks, but we have a victory here tonight. But let's not forget those people along the way. Thanks very much. Governor?
Thank you, Colonel. Well, on behalf of Crystal and Martin and Wnyc, on behalf of the MIT officer who was lost last night and the transit police officer who was injured, on behalf of the hundreds of people who were hurt by the explosions at the marathon, I want to say how grateful I am to the Colonel, to the Special Agent in charge, Rick Delorier, to all of the law enforcement who worked so well and so hard together to bring us to tonight's conclusion. It was a very, very complicated case, a very challenging case, and there are still some questions remaining to be answered. But as the Colonel said, because of that extraordinary collaboration and cooperation by all of these law enforcement resources and assets, and more to the point, people, professionals, who brought their A game, we have a suspect in custody tonight. I want to also just thank all of the members of the public for their extraordinary patience, their participation in this investigation by reviewing photographs of their own and others that were up through the media, and we thank you for that, and helping us narrow in on these suspects. They were helpful and patient, and we are grateful for that as well. It's a night where I think we're all going to rest easy. Carmen?
Good evening. I'm United States Attorney Carmen Ortiz, and I have to say that both the governor and the colonel have put it tremendously well. Tonight, we feel a tremendous sense of gratitude and relief. The ordeal that this community, especially this neighborhood, has endured over the last 24 hours. Tonight, we can sleep a bit easier. And all of the unpredictable, horrific, and yet heroic acts that have occurred over the last several days, starting with the terrible bombing attacks that occurred on Monday, here we are, and not forgetting the victims of the crimes that have occurred over the last several days. The victims of the bombings, as the governor said, Martin, Wnyc, Crystal, 2 officers who have been hurt, 1 who lost his life, Sean Collier, and Richard Donahue, who is fighting for his life. Our thoughts and our prayers are with their families. Tonight you're going to have many questions, but I want to say, as I have said the last several days, this has been a very active and ongoing investigation. And although for some of you tonight is a closure, for me the journey continues. And so this will continue to be an ongoing and active investigation as we sort all the details, continue to evaluate a tremendous amount of evidence, and file our formal charges. But I will say this, I have never been prouder to stand with a tremendous group of law enforcement here, from the colonel to the commissioner to my federal colleague, Rick Delorier with the FBI, all of the federal agencies, the state and local departments that have worked so hard since the attacks on Monday, so committed and putting their lives on the line as we fought the last 24 hours to try to get a suspect into custody. And so my journey and my office's journey begins, and this investigation will continue, so we will not be able to provide the details that you may want at this time, but as the days continue, you will get answers to those questions. Thank you.
Mayor Menino?
Thank you. I just want to say very briefly, thank you. Thank you to the law enforcement officials who work together. State police, Boston police, FBI, all working together. That's when government works the best. I want to thank also the citizens out there. For the last week, worked in unknown what's happening out there because of the bombing at the marathon. But today, because of the hard work of so many individuals, my Boston police working together with the state police, we have a conclusion that we're all satisfied with. But also, folks, remember the folks who lost their lives this past week. This shall go on. We're a better city than what happened this past week, and we'll get better. And to all of you folks out in the media, thank you for the support you gave us for this past week. It wasn't easy. Some days you said to us, why? Let me tell you, we're there working hard. I want to say I spent a lot of time with the law enforcement officials. They worked so hard this week to come to a conclusion. Tonight, night, we say thank you to them for the work they did, tracing down every one of those leads that we got, which is so significant to what came to the end of this case today. Thank you. Alderman Ortiz, now it's up to her job to bring in the federal courts. But I tell you, I feel so good about this. I tell you, I'm so happy because the people of our greater Boston area will be able to sleep tonight because of the work of these individuals.
Good evening. My name is Rick Delorier. I'm the special agent in charge of the FBI's Boston Division. It seems like many months since Monday, April 15th, the day of the Boston Marathon bombings. Yet it has been merely 5 days since the tragic explosions that took 3 lives, critically injured over 180 spectators, and instilled terror and fear among the citizens of the city of Boston, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and elsewhere. Today, the city of Boston, the city of Cambridge, and the city of Watertown, and many other communities can breathe a sigh of relief knowing that 2 perpetrators who caused so much pain and anguish are no longer a threat to our personal safety and to our communities. Together, with the action and support of our Joint Terrorism Task Force partners, many of which are on the stage with me this evening, the FBI and our partners remain vigilant and continue to follow through thousands of leads and sifted through hundreds of tips, through thousands of man-hours to reach this moment. This was truly an absolutely intense investigation, and I do emphasize a truly intense investigation. As a result of that, justice is being served for the victims of these terrible crimes. I want to personally express the FBI's profound thanks to each of our partners for bringing us to this moment here this evening. No one agency alone accomplished this critically important task of keeping the city of Boston and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts safe. Thank you very much, and I support you. I thank you for your support of our media campaign the other day, which publicized the photos. I thank you very, very much for the support that the media provided us on that. It was phenomenal, and I thank each and every one of you tonight. Thank you.
Commissioner Davis.
Thank you.
4 days ago, my city was ruthlessly attacked. There's no explaining the savagery involved here. There's no explanation for it. I spent the last several days looking at hundreds of hours of videotape. I got to see how brutal that attack was over and over and over again. But more importantly, I got to see what the Boston police officers who responded to that scene, along with the medical personnel and the other first responders, did to put people back together. Tourniquets, stemming the bleeding with their hands, putting a man who was on fire out with their hands. These are the kind of things that came out of this savagery. It makes me proud to be a Boston police officer. It makes me proud to be a part of this team. Rick Delorier from the FBI could not be more cooperative. We've sat together almost hour for hour for the last 4 days, sharing every single bit of information in a real team. Colonel Albans, the same way. Carmen Ortiz, with us all the time. And then, to bring the governor and the mayor together, leading the city of Boston in responding to this. I finally just want to say that the citizens of the city have been incredible. They've been patient with us. They've endured an enormous amount of heartache and aggravation over the last 4 days. But we're very happy to try to put this back together. Thank you.
Watertown Police Chief DeBoe.
As the police chief of Watertown, I can't be prouder of my community in the men and women of the Watertown Police Department. What they've been through, what we've been through the last 24 hours, I wouldn't want to see another police department go through. The support that we've had from all the different agencies that have been mentioned tonight over the last 24 hours has been incredible. To see so many agencies work together with the governor, with the mayor of Boston, and our officials in Watertown has been really great. I've spoken to the people in Watertown before, but I can't thank you enough. The community stood strong, and it was a call from a resident of Watertown. We asked you to remain vigilant, and you did. We got that call, and we got the guy. And so we can't thank you enough. You've done everything and more than we've asked. Extremely proud of law enforcement today and what we've accomplished. Thank you.
Chief, did you have communication with the suspect?
Excuse me, we're not done. Chief McMillan from the MBTA.
I just want to thank all those who sent their thoughts and prayers to Officer Donahue and his family. Please know that it was deeply appreciated. Thank you. And I also want to commend all of the law enforcement agencies who took part in this. This is truly dedication and commitment at its best, and I'm proud to be part of it. Thank you.
Special Agent in charge of the ATF.
My name is Joseph Anarumo, Special Agent in charge of ATF. All right. Today, the entire world witnessed this law enforcement's community commitment to apprehending these offenders. Make no doubt that this combined effort will never cease in its protection of every city, every town, and every neighborhood in our nation. The prayers from every ATF employee will continue to go out to the victims as they heal from this senseless act of violence. And God bless the citizens.
Suffolk County District Attorney Dan Conley.
Thank you very much. I was listening to the police action all afternoon on the radio, and I'd like to join my voice, or add my voice, I should say, to those who came before me to say what an extraordinary police operation across all jurisdictions that I was able to listen to and witness today. I was down at the scene early on, and in our business, Carmen, myself, it's about accountability, and I can't say how happy I am and how pleased I am that the second subject was taken alive. This will really ensure accountability for the victims and their families. So congratulations to all law enforcement for a job very well done, and now the task ahead for accountability. Thank you.
We'll take questions.
How did the events transpire at the boat?
There was a call that came into the Watertown Police. 3 Boston police officers, along with state troopers and FBI agents, responded to Franklin Street. A man had gone out of his house after being inside the house all day, abiding by our request to stay inside. He walked outside and he saw blood on a boat in the backyard. He then opened the tarp on the top of the boat, and he looked in and saw a man covered with blood. He retreated and called us. We set up a perimeter around that boat, and over the course of the next hour or so, we exchanged gunfire with the suspect who was inside the boat, and ultimately the hostage rescue team of the FBI made an entry into the boat and removed the suspect who was still alive in the boat.
Can you talk about the imperative of taking him alive? Can you talk about the imperative of taking him alive? How much...
we always want to take all of the suspects alive.
I understand that, sir. But can you talk about it in the context of this particular individual? You talk about accountability. Can you talk about why you want to take him?
We always want to take somebody alive so that we can find out what happened, why it happened, and we can hold them for justice.
Other individuals, how badly injured is the suspect?
Did you have communication with this suspect?
How badly injured?
There was the hostage rescue team actually did work in trying to negotiate him out of that boat. They did try to talk him out, although from what I understand, he was not communicative.
Other people have also been taken into custody as well, reportedly. Have they aided and abetted the suspect?
There's been actually I don't have that information.
Commissioner Davis, can you talk about the suspect's
suspects out there that you've got your guy? This is it.
I think that based upon our investigation at this point in time, the citizens of the city of Boston in this area can be confident that the threat has been removed.
What kind of condition is the
Suspect is in serious condition at the hospital.
If they didn't rob the 7-Eleven, how did you know that these were the suspects you were looking for? They didn't rob the 7-Eleven, so how did you know that they were there at the same time?
The suspects came to our attention after a vicious assassination of the police officer at MIT, and a subsequent robbery that occurred where we got videotape from a gas station. The robbery actually was a carjacking. The car was taken from the scene. And officers engaged that car from the Watertown Police Department along with other officers. We were then able to put the case together.
When you were apprehending him at the boat, was he shot by a police officer?
The man who found him at the boat said that he was covered with blood. We assume that those injuries occurred the evening before. There was an exchange of gunfire at the boat. I don't know if he was struck.
You think the suspect was trying to grab the
there was a house in New Bedford that the hostage rescue team went into from the FBI because we felt that it was important to the investigation, but the suspect was not found.
Given that he was still out there and armed...
I'm sorry.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the reported assassination of Sergeant Collier? Was he shot in cold blood? What do you know about it?
My assessment of that particular incident is that he was assassinated in his cruiser.
And do you know what he was doing?
He was responding to a call for a disturbance.
Given that he was out there, still armed, was it a mistake to give the all clear and let people go outside because they have been at risk?
We certainly did not give an all clear. We made it clear that people, and Colonel Albans is here and spoke very eloquently to this. This was a very serious and dangerous situation. We had no information that the suspect was still holed up in this particular area. He managed to elude us by being just slightly outside of the perimeter that we set up. But in truth, we told everybody that this was a dangerous situation and they should be cautious. This is a very dangerous time in the world. We have to use caution. That's what we ask people to do. Thankfully, this man who found the suspect called us right away, did the right thing, got on 911. We were able to come in and take care of the situation.
Did he have explosives with him when he was captured?
There's no report of explosives with him at capture. But I got to tell you, I was at the scene last night just after this incident occurred. There was an exchange of over 200 rounds of gunfire. There were improvised explosive devices and handmade hand grenades that were thrown at the officers at the scene. This is the stuff that in an urban police department, it's almost unheard of. So these officers acted heroically, courageously. They protected the community, and they protected each other when they responded to this scene. I'm so proud of the actions of the Watertown Police, the State Police, the Boston Police. It's been an incredible team.
Did he have a weapon in the boat?
He did. You know what? I can't say. I was told that there was an exchange of gunfire. I was not there when he was taken out of the boat.
No Miranda warning. Claiming public exemption. The reason, could you explain that for us?
Actually, the United States Attorney may want to, or the FBI may want to explain that. It's a federal issue.
What are the extent of...
Had the boat been searched earlier
Just a
today?
minute, I'm going to finish the question.
No, it had not.
What was the question?
Reports tonight are that there was no Miranda warning given, that they were claiming a public safety exemption. Could we get an explanation for that?
There is a public safety exemption in cases of national security and potential charges involving acts of terrorism. And so the government has that opportunity right now, though I believe that the suspect has been taken to a hospital. So we'll start with there. Thank you. Yes? I'm sorry. What I indicated earlier is that this is still an active, an ongoing investigation. We're going to be reviewing all of the evidence. Before that kind of a decision is made in terms of whether or not to seek the death penalty, you review all of the evidence, and it's a very thoughtful, long process that is engaged, and it's the Attorney General of the Department of Justice that makes that final decision.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Karen.
Straight to the vote, and then can you or Colonel Albin talk to us a little bit about what happened when you were on the scene? Was he moving around? How did you know it was finally a chance to take him into custody?
Yes, I'm going to let.
We know he didn't go straight to the boat. We set up the perimeter with the best intentions, with a lot of information. We found blood in the car that he abandoned. We found blood behind a house inside the perimeter. So we had no information that he had gotten outside of perimeter. As we said, it was very chaotic early this morning. We had to aid a police officer that was shot, bleeding. And so there was a lot of things going on. We thought we got the perimeter solid, and we pretty much did that, but we were about 1 block away. So, but he had to be moving a little bit after he was behind the house for a period of time that we know.
When you got there, though, was he moving? And then how did you know that you could take him into custody? Had he been moving around? You were able to watch him?
Yeah.
Sure. The reason that we knew this is our helicopter had actually detected the subject in the boat. We have what's called a FLIR, a forward-looking infrared device on that helicopter. It picked up the heat signature of the individual, even though he was underneath what appeared to be the shrink wrap or a cover on the boat itself. And there was movement from that point on, and the helicopter was able to direct the tactical teams over to that area and ultimately take him into custody.
Did the police search the boat during the day?
Yeah, it was outside the perimeter during the day, so it was not searched. This was the act of a citizen that went out and discovered this individual in the boat and ultimately called the Watertown Police Department and resulted in this our response.
What were the suspects doing at MIT? Were they planning another bomb?
The suspect won't make it and won't live to tell the story of what happened?
I'm sorry?
Is there a chance the suspect won't make it?
I don't know. I did not see him when he was taken into custody. I know he's in serious condition, but I don't know to what extent. I think we've taken enough questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This is 90.9 WBUR, continuing coverage of the Boston Marathon bombing. I'm Sasha Pfeiffer in the studio with Meghna Chakrabarty and David Boeri and Kurt Nickisch. President Obama is expected to address the country momentarily, but before he does come to do that, we want to recap what we just heard. An incredible law enforcement press conference in which 10 officials came to the podium, confirmed what we have known for about an hour. 19-year-old Johar Tsarnaev is in custody. An incredible story, and actually absolutely dramatic story, involving once the shelter order was lifted at about 6, a Watertown resident who had been inside all day long went outside, saw blood on a boat in his backyard, opened the tarp covering the boat, saw a man covered with blood, went back inside, contacted Watertown police. At that point, 3 Boston police officers, along with state troopers and FBI agents, went to that backyard. A hostage team approached the boat, tried to negotiate, ultimately was not able to. We heard that the suspect was not communicative. Ultimately, they did take that suspect into custody. He is now in serious condition at the hospital. Again, dramatic turn of events, but we have a suspect in custody, and we are waiting momentarily for President Obama to speak to the country as well.
You can hear the palpable sense of pride and relief in this press conference amongst law enforcement officials. We heard from, as Sasha said, a lot of people from local and federal law enforcement officials as well. They're answering specific questions about what has happened in the past few hours, but not giving us very many answers about the next steps that they're going to take. But once again, just to recap, Johar Tsarnaev is now confirmed to be in custody, in serious condition, in a Boston, in a local area hospital. An incredible story of how after the shelter-in-place suggestion was lifted, moments after that, someone left their house and saw blood on a boat, lifted up the tarp, and saw a bloodied man inside and had the presence of mind to call law enforcement officials immediately, which is what kicked off the second round of intense activity that led to the apprehension of the suspect.
Right, and clearly a night of incredible joy and celebration for the law enforcement officials involved. We heard the state police colonel, Massachusetts State Police, Timothy Albin, say, "We're exhausted, folks, but we have a victory here tonight." And we heard the Watertown Police Chief, Edward DeVoe, say that what his force has been through, he wouldn't want to see another force go through it. Kurt Nickisch is with us. He's been out in the field for much of the past 24 hours covering this.
Yeah, and I just left that area where they've been holding this press conference, and I can tell you that a lot of the police are leaving that area, and just outside, people have gathered and they're holding up American flags and applauding the police vehicles that are leaving the staging area. And on in through Boston, a lot of people are out on the streets. They're going into bars. You hear car horns honking. The palpable sense of relief that Meghna talked about is very much being expressed in very visible and amazing ways out on the street. Not like Osama bin Laden was captured. Nothing to that extent, but you can definitely hear and feel it on the streets.
We also heard U.S. Attorney Carmen Ortiz say that for some people this is a night of closure, but for her the journey continues, that this is, of course, an ongoing and active investigation. She said she would not be able to provide many details at the time, but clearly very complicated. So, David Bowery, this is now just the beginning of a new process for prosecutors.
That's right, and several decisions need to be made. One, of course, we're talking about an American citizen. There has been a lot of talk, and especially after the case of the Detroit underpants bomber a couple of years ago, as to whether or not we should be using military tribunals instead of courts in order to prosecute terrorist suspects. That's an issue. Perhaps it won't be a big debate, but that's one of them. Then we talk about the charges, the kinds of charges. They're federal terrorist charges. There's no statute in federal law that prohibits or makes a crime of murder. However, there has been legislation in recent years to federalize or to criminalize murder on a federal level, whether it's for instance, a president, a political officer, a policeman, and now, of course, terror charges. And we have 3 murders here. So the other question, 4 murders, I'm sorry.
3 marathon spectators and 1 police officer.
And a police officer. So the other question, of course, is whether to seek the death penalty. These are all big decisions that are going to need to be made. You know, the one thing, I mean, this is a tremendous victory in the short run by law enforcement. They've worked terrifically well. We've heard the signs of respect for them, the acknowledgement of their courage and all. It's in a short run because we know there are...
You are listening to special coverage of the apprehension of the second Boston Marathon bombing suspect. And the President of the United States will be speaking very shortly. You're listening to coverage here on WNYC, AM and FM, New York and New Jersey Public Radio. We'll join President Obama in just a moment. And NPR special coverage as well.
This is WNYC, AM, FM, and HD, New York. About the surrender of the second suspect in the Boston Marathon bombing case. We don't expect it to be a very long statement, and it's not a news conference. There won't be questions, but it would be kind of put some punctuation on this event.
And why don't we go to the White House and to NPR's White House correspondent Ari Shapiro, who is standing by. And Ari, we mentioned earlier, we have not heard today
That's right.
from President Obama. He did speak, of course, at the Interfaith Memorial Service, spoke passionately to people there in Boston.
Yeah, but it's been a really notable change after a week where we heard from President Obama every day, keeping people abreast, if not on the details of the investigation, then at least on the sense that this is going forward, we will catch the people, the country will heal, the country will recover. Today, there were readouts on background of meetings the president had with intelligence officials and his national security team and, his cabinet, but nothing on the record from anyone at the White House, because it was such a fast-moving situation that they just didn't want to be out there being asked questions they couldn't answer, or worse, being saying something that later turned out not to be true. And so now that this does seems to have reached some resolution, and thank goodness, a happy ending with the suspect taken alive, if you can call it that. We are going to hear something from the president to, as you said, sort of put a cap on all of this.
And there's been just scenes of, you say, a happy resolution. Certainly for the people of Watertown, this is a happy resolution. There has been much jubilation in the streets of people cheering and chanting and waving and saluting the police officers who've been working so hard in that neighborhood.
That's right. Sorry, go ahead, Robert.
No, Ari, no public comments, but has there been a lot of talk about this at the White House just the same?
Oh, absolutely. We understand that they even had 2 feeds of local Boston television stations. So in addition to all of the TV networks and the cable channels that they were monitoring, they could monitor local news out of Boston as reported by the local stations there. Needless to say, there have been nonstop briefings. It's all that anyone can talk about. I emailed a White House official about something else and got a response that was like, this is the only thing on anyone's mind today. As you may know, D.C. was under a tornado watch for some of the evening, and I jokingly said to a senior White House official, "Hey, do you have any updates for us on the tornado?" and got a look as if to say, that is the last straw. After the week we've had, I cannot take a question about a tornado.
This was a week that witnessed momentous votes in the U.S. Senate on gun control. There's a deal in the works on immigration that's, maybe going to come through. Maybe it won't come through the Senate.
There's
this
been so
usual fiscal
many
crisis hanging
There
over
was
the...
an Elvis impersonator who was accused of threatening the president's life with ricin in letters. Oh, as you can hear, this is the 2-minute warning. The president is going to come out and speak in a couple of minutes. A 2-minute warning can mean 2 minutes, or it can mean 20 minutes. In this case, it's probably closer to 2. But this was an enormous week with news of such magnitude. It's easy to forget some of the things that otherwise would have dominated the front page for days, and this week just sort of got swept under the rug.
The front page and the lead of our broadcast.
Yes,
every
exactly.
Exactly. Could remind our younger listeners what a front page was. It'd be the top item on the screen when you're looking at the news.
Robert, you mentioned the gun bill that was defeated, which on Wednesday afternoon, I believe it was Wednesday, the president made this passionate, fiery speech in the Rose Garden, and the very next day, Thursday, was in Boston, delivering this moving speech at this memorial service that had the crowd roaring to its feet. And now that this manhunt reaches some resolution, we'll finally hear this sort of, you can think of it as perhaps even a capstone statement from the president.
This was an event like the shootings in Connecticut that seizes and changes the mood of the country and focuses everyone's attention on a single place.
And as President Obama said yesterday in his speech at the memorial service, Boston feels personal. Boston is a city that so many people feel some connection with, even if they've never lived there. Of course, President Obama and the First Lady had lived there. They both went to school there. The president talked about walking the streets of Cambridge when he was a Harvard law student. But he said, everybody feels a connection to Boston. As Governor Deval Patrick put it, Massachusetts invented America. It did change the mood of the country for these last few days, and it changes the mood of the country again to know that this second suspect is in custody.
And, of course, the attacks, those bombing attacks coming at the Boston Marathon, which is an event, obviously, not just for Boston, but for people from all over the country, all over the world. I mean, we heard people say that really it was the world who was attacked because so many people from so many countries were represented at that race.
And that it's not a sporting event that you need a ticket to go to. It's something everyone can come to. You saw the flags at the finish line of all these different countries lining the streets. It symbolically marks the start of spring in Boston, this celebration of Patriots' Day. In so many ways, there was such symbolism that was marred by these explosions. The point that President Obama has been making all week...
We're going to have to cut away.
Here's the president.
All right.
Good evening, everybody. Tonight, our nation is in debt to the people of Boston and the people of Massachusetts. After a vicious attack on their city, Bostonians responded with resolve and determination. They did their part as citizens and partners in this investigation. Boston police and state police and local police across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts responded with professionalism and bravery over 5 long days. And tonight, because of their determined efforts, we've closed an important chapter in this tragedy. I've been briefed earlier this evening by FBI Director Mueller. After the attacks on Monday, I directed the full resources of the federal government to be made available to help state and local authorities in the investigation and to increase security as needed. Over the past week, close coordination among federal, state, and local officials, sharing information, moving swiftly to track down leads, has been critical to this effort. They all worked as they should, as a team, and we are extremely grateful for that. We owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to all our outstanding law enforcement professionals. These men and women get up every day, they put on that uniform, they risk their lives to keep us safe, and as this week showed, they don't always know what to expect. So our thoughts are with those who were wounded in pursuit of the suspects, and we pray for their full recovery. We also send our prayers to the Collier family, who grieved the loss of their son and brother Sean. He was born to be a police officer, said his chief at MIT. He was just 26 years old. And as his family has said, he died bravely in the line of duty, doing what he committed his life to doing, serving and protecting others. So we're grateful to him. Obviously, tonight there are still many unanswered questions. Among them, why did young men who grew up and studied here as part of our communities and our country resort to such violence? How did they plan and carry out these attacks, and did they receive any help? The families of those killed so senselessly deserve answers. The wounded, some of whom now have to learn how to stand and walk and live again, deserve answers. And so I've instructed the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security and our intelligence community to continue to deploy all the necessary resources to support the investigation, to collect intelligence, and to protect our citizens. We will determine what happened. We will investigate any associations that these terrorists may have had, and we'll continue to do whatever we have to do to keep our people safe. One thing we do know is that whatever hateful agenda drove these men to such heinous acts cannot prevail. Whatever they thought they could ultimately achieve, they've already failed. They failed because the people of Boston refused to be intimidated. They failed because, as Americans, we refuse to be terrorized. They failed because we will not waver from the character and the compassion and the values that define us as a country, nor will we break the bonds that hold us together as Americans. That American spirit includes staying true to the unity and diversity that makes us strong, like no other nation in the world. In this age of instant reporting, tweets, and blogs, there's a temptation to latch onto any bit of information, sometimes to jump to conclusions. But when a tragedy like this happens, with public safety at risk and the stakes so high, it's important that we do this right. That's why we have investigations. That's why we relentlessly gather the facts. That's why we have courts. And that's why we take care not to rush to judgment. Not about the motivations of these individuals, certainly not about entire groups of people. After all, one of the things that makes America the greatest nation on earth, but also one of the things that makes Boston such a great city, is that we welcome people from all around the world. People of every faith, every ethnicity, from every corner of the globe. So as we continue to learn more about why and how this tragedy happened, let's make sure that we sustain that spirit. Tonight we think of all the wounded still struggling to recover. Certainly we think of Crystal Campbell. We think of Ling Soo Lu. And we think of little Martin Richard.